Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf nun Dalet. I wish everyone at this point a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Kol hakavod to everybody learning on Erev Pesach. All the dapim are up already on the site for the whole week of Pesach. So anyone who wants to get ahead or learn later, either which way, everything's there for you. Today's daf is sponsored by Lori Stark in loving memory of her mother-in-law Sarah Shapiro and her father Nehemiah Sasowitz. Sarah proudly shared that her father taught her some Talmud at a time when that was not done. Came to Chicago from Stasha, Poland, and was known for delivering the laundry along with the Dvar Torah. Sarah was a highly respected Jewish educator in Chicago. May both their memories be for a blessing. Today's daf is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island in honor of the birth of a grandson to our friend and co-learner Leah Britt. May the entire family be zochet to raise him with Torah, the Kupal, and Masim Tovim, and may this simcha be one of many we will celebrate together. Okay, we're going to get started now with our daf. So our topic basically for today is chomesh, this 1/5 payment. And we're going to have all sorts of different questions about this chomesh payment. So again, it comes up in the Torah, and we'll see a whole bunch of different scenarios where it comes up, that it says v'asaf chamishito alav or chamishitav alav or some sort of phrase like that, where you have to add a fifth. So right now we're talking particularly about, we're actually talking in general about all kinds of chomesh payments. What do we mean when we say a fifth? Now, you and I would normally think if we say a fifth, that means you take the value of the item and you calculate a fifth, and that would be the value. But the question is, do we do it from within or from without? From within means we take the item and we say, oh, this is worth 100. We take a fifth of that, that's 20, 1/5 more. But the question is, do we do it like that? Or do we do it milavar? It's a fifth from the outside, meaning once you add the extra portion, we say, oh, this item we're going to split up into 4, add a 5th portion to it, and then we're going to have 5 portions that are equal once we add the 5th, and then it will basically be a 5th of the total once the 5th was added, which really ends up being a quarter. Okay, so that was the question the Gemara asked, and now we're going to say Tashma, 3 lines from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Bet, and the words, by the way, are milagav, which means from the inside, or milabar, from the outside. Bar is always outside. That's why braita is something brought from the outside. It's not in the Mishnah, it's outside the Mishnah. Okay, chayot bar are wild animals. Bar always means outside. Tashma, habalim umbrim be'esrim, bechol adam be'esrim. Okay, it seems to me like we have kind of like a bidding auction here. We have an item that I consecrated. And then basically you would think if I consecrated the item, I have to redeem it. Well, the laws in general of redeeming sanctified items or maaser, sheni, or all that, is that if I redeem it myself, I add a 5th. If someone else redeems my item, which someone can pay to redeem my item, they don't add a 5th. So if we have a situation where I sanctified an item and then we end up with this bidding war, okay, I say I'll give 20 and you say you'll give 20 for it. Now, since I have to add a 5th and you don't have to add a 5th, if I do 20, I'll have to add more. So I'm the one who's going to win the bid because the hekdesh is always going to want to get the most amount of money because in the end it's going to the temple. So if it's a matter of you saying 20 and me saying 20, I have to give 20. Plus, I have to be the one to give, plus I'm going to add the 5th payment. And in the description, now the topic of this braita is not our topic. Our topic of this braita is who pays and what do they pay, depending on different bids. We're going to have a bunch of different scenarios. But the main point is going to be that when they describe the amount and they calculate it, it's going to be clear that they calculated chomesh based on chomesh milaval from the outside, which really means a quarter. So we'll see that right now. So the Baalim say esrim. I say I want to give 20 for my item. You say I'll give 20 for that item to the temple. Habaalim kodmim mipnei shemosifim chomesh. So I get chosen to do it because I'm going to end up adding more, and the hekdesh will win. Echad amar echad. Okay, that's why I said it sounds like a bidding war. Somebody says, "Oh, harei alai b'esrim v'echad. I'll give 21." Well, now what has to happen? Habaalim notnim esrim v'sheish. I have to give now. It's a little different than a bidding war because I now, as the owner, have to give the 21. I have to match their bid, basically. I have to give whatever the highest bid is. Plus, I have to add a 5th. But what we're going to see is on what basis do I add a 5th? Not to the 21 that I'm actually going to pay, but to my original bid, I'm going to add a 5th. And that's why, how much am I going to add? And here we get to our answer. Esrim b'sheish, I give their bid 21 plus another 5 because 5 is 1/4 of 20, my original bid. Okay, in each of these cases, we're going to see that someone keeps upping my bid. I'm always only going to pay, and we're going to see that spelled out in the last line. I'm always going to pay chomesh on what my bid was. even though I end up actually paying more than my bid because you bid higher than me or someone else bid higher than me. But the chomesh will always be calculated based on the original. And therefore, in this case, the chomesh is always going to be 5 because it's 1/4 of 20, which again, once you add the 5, you get to 25. And then when you look at the whole thing, the 5 is 1/5 of the total. And that's called chomesh milaval. If somebody claims, somebody bids 22, so I have to match their bid and add another, right, the 5th on my original bid. We're just going to keep going through examples. 23, sometimes you think that, right, we've seen this in a bunch of sugyas, that math wasn't necessarily their specialty, and therefore they sometimes, or not everyone's specialty, they weren't all good at math, they spell out all these things that you think, okay, you didn't really need to spell this out for me. 23, so for 23, you pay 23 again plus 5, 28. 24, you pay 29. If it's 25, the owners pay 30. And here comes the line that explains the principle in this braita, which again is not our main point. It's not the reason why we brought this braita, but you don't have to pay chomesh on the higher bid of the other bidders. You do have to pay what they bid, but the chomesh is calculated based on the person's original bid. Shema mina, but what do you learn from this whole thing anyway, right? That was the end of the braita. Now we say, what do you learn from here? The chomesh is calculated on the outer calculation and not on the inner, not on the principle itself. Kitanai, now they point out, even though we just proved that the chomesh is milaval from the outside, but it actually is a machloket tanaim. Vayasaf chamishito alav, that's one of the psukim that talks about adding this 5th. Shiur hu v'chumsho chamisha. Divrei Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua says together with the chomesh, there's 5 parts. That's how I described it before. You have the 4 parts of the keren, you split it into 4, and then you add an additional 5th part, and then you end up with 1/5. That's from the outside. Rabbi Yonatan Amar chamishito chumsho shel keren. He says it the way you would have said it, which is, or the way I think I would have said it, 1/5 of the item itself. So that in this case, by the way, would be 4, right? Because it would be 1/5 of 20 would be 4. And a second question on chomesh, a very basic question. Chomesh ma'akev or ino ma'akev? Does it prevent it from working? Okay, right now we're talking about maaser sheni. Meaning, I take my maaser sheni fruits. I want to redeem them on a coin to bring them to Jerusalem. I redeem them on a coin. I have $100 worth of produce. I redeem it on $100 worth of coins, and I didn't yet add the chomesh. I didn't add the 25. Are my fruits redeemed or not? Do we say they're not redeemed until I add the 5th? In other words, I haven't done anything yet. Or do we say, no, you redeem the 100, so you're good. You just also still have this halacha that by Torah law that you have to add the 5th. But it doesn't mean that your fruits, what would happen? In other words, if we say it works, those fruits now don't have sanctity anymore. Originally, I can only eat them if I bring them to Jerusalem. Now I remove the sanctity onto the coins. The coins have to be brought to Jerusalem, but I can eat those fruits in my house or wherever I want. So the question is, if I didn't yet add the 25, is it a done deal or not? So that's the question. And here we're going to give the 2 sides. Arba'a ba'arba'a, and by the way, the example they're going to bring is chomesh milaval. That's not really what we're talking about, but you'll see from the example. 4 in 4 is parik. Okay, like I said, $100 for $100. But just in addition, you have to add a 5th, but that's not connected to the fact that you've already redeemed your fruits. Therefore, chomesh wouldn't be maked. That's one side. Or odilma arba'a b'chamisha parik. Or do we view this as the Torah is telling you something valued at 4, or as I said, $100 before, is only redeemed when you add the 5th, meaning 4 is redeemed by 5, 100 is redeemed by 125. Is that the way we view it? And then the chomesh would be ma'akev. Without the chomesh, your stuff is not redeemed. So I'm a Ravina Tashma. Ravina is going to learn a little bit backhanded. He's going to say the following: Hadamai ein lo chomesh ve'ein lo bi'ur. Demai, okay, we have something in this daf today that relates to Pesach, which is din bi'ur. Okay. First, let's talk about the demai. Demai is produce that was taken from an amaretz, we're concerned they didn't take maaserot, so you have to take maaserot by rabbinic law. But because it's only by rabbinic law, when you take the maaser of the tamai produce and then you redeem it onto a coin to bring to Jerusalem, the maaser sheni, you don't have to add chomesh to it. And there's no biur. What is biur? It's something we do on Pesach, not this year. In years 4 and 7 of the Shemitah cycle, you do what's called biur masot on Pesach, where you say, I now have taken, you have to make sure that if you have any maaser in your house or truma that's supposed to go to the kohen, you have to, or the Levi, you have to get it out of your house. You have to give it to them. Okay, you have to make sure that you're kind of done with everything. Pesach, because it's at the end of the 3rd year and the end of you're basically, the year ends Rosh Hashanah, but there's still stuff growing that's considered part of that previous year's produce. By Pesach, that's the end of it. Anything that might have grown. So you basically, by that point of the year, you have to say, I've done everything. I've gotten it all out of my house. So, and there's a whole ceremony you say. Anyway, that's not relevant for our purposes. Ha-keren yeshlo. So now what do you see from here? Demai, you don't have to do chomesh, but you obviously have the keren. That's clear. Now, why would you distinguish between the keren and the chomesh? If not, because maybe there's a distinction between them. My time. So he's going to suggest here, the Gemara, Rabbanit says, keren dema'akev b'deoraita, ita b'derabbanan. Because keren is essential. And if you don't do the keren, if you don't redeem the 4 for 4, then it's not redeemed at all. Well, that's why in the case of a safek, we're going to have you do the keren and redeem it, for its value. Therefore, in a rabbinic case, ita b'derabbanan, we're going to make it. We're going to make it exist, right? You have to take the maaser, obviously, and redeem it onto a coin. If you're going to bring it to Jerusalem, you don't want to schlep it, so you redeem it on a coin. It's value. But chomesh, but since chomesh anyway, chomesh is a Torah law, but it's not essential. And therefore, when we have a rabbinic where it's only out of a doubt, maybe this maaser would take it, maybe they weren't, we're going to have you take the maaser, we're not going to have you do the chomesh law. And that's because chomesh itself must not be makif. And that's Ravina's proof. Now the Gemara says, just like the previous sugya, but a little bit different. Last time we had an answer from a braita, chomesh is milaval, but then we said it's a machloket tanaim. So here they're going to suggest, but then they're going to reject it, that perhaps it's also machloket tanaim. So Ravina proved from a braita that the chomesh is not essential. If you didn't do the chomesh, it's still fine. But now the Gemara is going to say, maybe this is a machloket tanaim. Let's see. Lema kitana. Whenever it says lema kitana as opposed to kitanai, it's actually going to suggest it and reject it. Now this is going to look very clearly like the machloket, because it's the exact case we've been talking about. You gave the keren, meaning you took your $100 worth of fruits, you redeemed it on $100, but you didn't lo natana ta chomesh. You didn't add the chomesh. So our whole question is, can you eat those fruits now, or can't you eat the fruits? So Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, yochal, you can eat the fruits. They're redeemed. Rabbi Yehoshua Amar, lo yochal. Rabbi Yehoshua says you can't eat them. Why? We assume, why do you say you can't eat them? Because the redemption isn't complete till you add the 5th. So there you have it. Okay? Machloket. Now, before we get there, though, there's still more to this braita, and then from there, they're going to further prove the machloket. I'm a Rebbe. You're in divrei Rabbi Eliezer b'Shabbat, and you're in divrei Rabbi Yehoshua b'chol. Okay, at first glance, this seems very strange. Why would we distinguish Shabbat and chol when it comes to maaser sheni? What's the connection? Well, Rabbi Eliezer, what he says is, I would hold like Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to Shabbat, meaning, if I redeemed the fruits and didn't add the chomesh, and now it's Shabbat, and I want to be able to eat those fruits in my house and not have to, right? Otherwise, you have to bring them to Jerusalem. Well, if it's Shabbat and I need nice food for Shabbat, will allow me to eat them. But if it's a regular day and it's just that I want to eat them, but it's not, there's no mitzvah to eat good food, well, then we're not going to allow it. That's basically what he says. So it seems to me like on Shabbat, I would hold like Rabbi Eliezer and permit that food that you redeemed, but I would hold like Rabbi Yehoshua when it was a regular weekday and not permit. The point they want to make now is, the fact that he says, I would hold like Rabbi Eliezer on Shabbat, sounds like, though, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold only on Shabbat. Rabbi Eliezer holds across the board, you can eat it. And I would hold like Rabbi Yehoshua on a weekday, but I wouldn't hold like him on Shabbat. But the fact that Rebbe is saying, I would hold like this position specifically on a weekday, michlal de pliga afilu b'Shabbat. In other words, what they're trying to establish is from Rebbe, you can infer that the machloket is across the board, not related to Shabbat or Chol. It's just that Rebbe is saying, I would hold like this position there, this position there. But the point is, each position is 100% yes or 100% no. Now, once you establish that, then you can say what we assumed, which is ma'ala b'kamiflige. Is this not the machloket? They're specifically arguing about our topic. To Rabbi Eliezer savar chomesh lo ma'akev, Rabbi Yehoshua savar chomesh ma'akev. It's pretty obvious. Rabbi Eliezer holds you can always eat them, no matter what. Whole Shabbat, it doesn't matter, because chomesh is not essential. So you didn't do the chomesh, who cares? It's fine. And again, you still have a Torah obligation to remove the fifth. To add a fifth. But if you didn't do it, it doesn't affect your ability to have redeemed those fruits. It's just that you didn't fulfill a Torah obligation to add a fifth. And Rabbi Yehoshua savar chomesh ma'akev. He says, no way, no how. It doesn't work, and that's why you can't eat the produce, because it doesn't work. It's not redeemed until you fully add the chomesh. So Amar Rav Papa lo. Rav Papa says, no, that's not the machloket. Really, everyone thinks that by Torah law, the chomesh is not essential. Again, you have to do it, but it doesn't prevent you from being able to eat the produce. If I only redeemed for a value of payroll of $4 or $100 for $100, and I didn't add the chomesh payment, I'm still not fulfilling the Torah law of adding chomesh, but I can eat those fruits anywhere I want. The sanctity is off of them. Everyone agrees with this. So now we have to explain, why does Rabbi Yehoshua say you can't eat it? Rabbi Eliezer makes perfect sense. That's why you can eat the fruits, because the sanctity was removed. Here, it's not by Torah law. By Torah law, it's redeemed. Rabbi Yehoshua says, but you can't eat it by rabbinic law. Why not? Because we're trying to prevent you from forgetting about the chomesh. What's the best way to prevent you from forgetting about adding the chomesh payment, which is a Torah law, right? Well, tell you can't eat the fruits. If I tell you can't eat the fruits until you do the chomesh, you'll remember to do the chomesh because you'll want to eat the fruits. So really, Yehoshua says, we're worried people are going to forget or maybe be on purpose negligent and just never take care of the chomesh. So what do? We tell you it's not redeemed, right? You can't eat your fruits until you pay the chomesh to prevent that. And Rabbi Eliezer says, I'm not worried about that, right? The rabbis aren't worried. They know you have this Torah obligation. You're going to do it anyway. So, there's no need to say, oh, don't eat the fruits yet as a preventative. Now we get to something interesting. If already we're saying we're worried about negligence or not negligence, well, maybe we'll find a case where that negligence doesn't apply. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, it's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan does. Hakol modim behekdesh shechilel. Okay, we've been talking about maaser sheni. What if it's a sanctified item, which also requires redeeming and also requires a fifth? If I sanctify an item, like my couch in my house, I'm not going to schlep my couch to Jerusalem. What am I going to do? I'm going to redeem it onto money, but my couch is worth $1,000. Now I have to add an additional chomesh and bring it to the temple. So in that case, Rabbi Yochanan says, everyone agrees that it works. As soon as I did $100, my couch can now be used in my house. Why? Because it's not like maaser sheni where I just have to remember to add the fifth and bring it to Jerusalem for my own sake. There's nobody demanding money from me. When it's for the temple and I bring the $1,000 of the couch, that the couch's value to the temple, well, those treasurers know that I haven't fully paid. The treasurers of the temple know that I haven't paid the additional fifth, and they're going to come knocking at my door, or according to this, they're going to come find me in the shuk, and they're going to make me pay. So there's someone pounding on my door for that payment. So we're not worried about negligence, in that case, everyone would agree, since chomesh isn't ma'akev, doesn't prevent the redemption from happening. It's only a preventative measure that I don't forget to do the 1/5, or I don't purposely not do the 1/5. In this case, there's no concern. That's what we think right now. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Hekdesh lo pligi? You're basically saying in hekdesh, everyone agrees that chomesh isn't ma'akev, and right, if I don't do the chomesh, that item is no longer sanctified. I can eat it. If it's food, I can, whatever I need to do. The hatanya, but it says in a braita, natanit kerem v'lo natanit chomesh. Rabbi Eliezer omer chilel, chachamim omrim lo chilel. Now here we're talking about hekdesh. If you gave the principle and you didn't add the fifth payment, Rabbi Eliezer says it's effective, and the rabbis say it's not effective. Okay, it didn't work. So here you have it. It didn't work according to the rabbis. How could you say there's no machloket when the mainstream position is it doesn't work? So that's a little difficult. And just keep going on in that braita. This is going to be the same parallel braita to what we saw with the maaser sheni. Rebbe, Nir'im divrei Rabbi Eliezer. It's similar structure, not the same content. Nir'im divrei Rabbi Eliezer b'hekdesh, v'divrei chachamim b'maaser. Rebbe says, I would hold like Rabbi Eliezer that it works in hekdesh because you have the treasurers pounding on your door who will collect it and there's no concern for pshiuta. But I would hold like the rabbis when it comes to maaser. But when it comes to maaser, we are worried about negligence. So now, Mida Amar, we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. From the fact that Rebbe said, Yerim Devrei Rabbi Eliezer b'hekdesh, michal depli gafilu b'maaser. Mida Amar, Mida Ka'amar, Yerim Devrei Chamim b'maaser, michal de'inu pli gafilu b'hekdesh. Now, from the fact that Rebbe said, I would hold like him in maaser and I would hold like him in hekdesh, sounds like, but they themselves argue in both cases across the board, which sounds like they have an argument in hekdesh, which is what we tried to say they don't. So how do we explain Rabbi Yochanan? So the Gemara changes Rabbi Yochanan, and actually you're going to see it similar to the previous, which is, if Rabbi Yochanan really did say something, this must be what he said, and they change his line. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hakol modim b'Shabbat behekdesh shechila. Chad dechti b'karat Shabbat oneg, ve'od u'il v'gizbarim tovino tov b'shul. The issue of the gizbarim knocking at your door is only partially sufficient. So when it comes to Shabbat, Rabbi Yochanan says, on Shabbat, everyone would agree. If I'm on Shabbat and I want to eat produce that I sanctified to the temple, everyone will agree that that's fine, even if I didn't do the chomesh. Even the position that holds not, right? The rabbi's position here. Why? Because there's two things going on. There's two factors. Number one, we want you to have oneg Shabbat, and it's oneg Shabbat if you get to eat the food that you want to eat. Number two, the gizbarim anyway, we're not as worried as pshuta as we are in a different case, right? In the maaser case, because there are the gizbarim who are going to collect. Because of the two factors, the gizbar itself on its own is not enough. And there is a machloket on a weekday. But on Shabbat, they would all agree that it's fine. So there it goes, connects with the previous sugya a little bit. And we see they actually do have an argument about hekdesh, but there's one point in hekdesh that they agree upon, and that must be what Rabbi Yochanan meant. I'm a Rami bar Hama. Now, Rami bar Hama is going to take three halachot that have to do with the keren in different cases. One is hekdesh, one is truma, and one is maaser. And he's going to ask, are the laws we know about redeeming these items applicable not only to the keren, to the principal, but also to the chomesh? Okay, another chomesh question. Is the chomesh treated like the keren in the following areas? So let's go one by one and we'll see. And then the answer is going to be yes. We're going to prove the chomesh is always like the keren. So whatever laws are true for the keren in particular cases will be true for the chomesh as well. So here goes. So Rami bar Hama says, hekdesh eno mitchalel ala karka. So here's a law. When you have something that's hekdesh, like let's say I sanctify my couch, or I sanctify, we'll see soon, we're going to bring up this pasuk, so maybe I'll talk about it. You sanctify a non-kosher animal. Okay, a non-kosher animal can be sanctified for its value. It still has value, a non-kosher animal. First of all, you can work it, right? It can be worked in your field, has a value. You could sell it to a Gentile to slaughter. You can, okay, so that in and of itself has value. So if I sanctify a non-kosher animal to the temple, I have to bring its value to the temple, basically. I know if I sanctify a kosher animal, that means I'm sanctifying it for a sacrifice, right? An animal that can be sacrificed. But if I sanctify a non-kosher animal, which can't be sacrificed, I'm bringing its value. So then I have to redeem it. I have to bring money to the temple because the temple doesn't have any use for non-kosher animals. So if I want to be mechalel, I want to redeem it onto something, I can't redeem it onto land and say, okay, this land now belongs to the temple. I can only redeem it onto money. Because the Torah says, "V'natan kesef v'kamlo." You give the money, right? The money gets the sanctity of the item. But what about the chomesh? That's the value of the item itself can only be redeemed onto money. But maybe the chomesh can be redeemed onto land because it's separate. Second question. Truma. If I take a kohen's truma, I steal it, and I eat it, what do I have to do? First of all, I'm supposed to get the death penalty, death by the hands of God, not in the court. But besides that, I have to return the value of the truma to the kohen, plus add an additional fifth. Now, when I do the keren payment, the value of the item itself, it says I can only pay from chulin. I can't give the kohen money. So I stole 10 lemons. I can't give the kohen money for those lemons. I have to give the kohen lemons or some other similar produce. Like it doesn't have to be similar to a lemon. It just has to be produce, which is called chulin. It's only paid from chulin. You have to pay from chulin Meaning what happens? I have to give the Kohen produce that immediately when I give it to the Kohen, it becomes truma. Okay? Because I'm replacing the Kohen's truma that I stole. How do we know this? Because it says, Rahman Amar v'natan l'Kohen et HaKodesh. It's actually kind of funny. You give them chulin, but it says Kodesh. Well, what does it mean? Because you give them chulin that can become Kodesh. You have to give them an item that will turn into Kodesh. It will become sanctified the minute I give it. If I give them money, it doesn't become truma. There's no such thing. So that's with the Karen. So now we want to know, obviously, can I pay the chomesh, though, as money, for example? Or does it have to be paid in produce, like the original item? Maaser, asimon. We saw this before. You can't redeem maaser onto a coin without an imprint in it. Because of vitzarta, which actually means you bind the money and bring it with you. But what they learn from their white sarta, because you learned sula, it has to have an image on it. You have to have a coin, not a flat coin that doesn't have an image in. But maybe a chomesh you could put on the asimon. So with Galgil Milta, so Rabbi Yehoshua asked this question. It Galgil Milta l'kamid Rabba. Eventually, it gets to Rabba. His question. Amar who he said, Amar kra alav. All the times it says on the sheet, it said Yiten chamishito Yosef alav, or there's this word alav in all the psukim, and alav they say relates back to the Karen. So they say l'rabot chumsho kamoto. This teaches you the Karen, the chomesh is like the Karen. So whatever laws are true for the Karen are going to be true for the chomesh. So again, each one has its own laws: truma, hekdesh, maaser. Okay, but whatever laws are true for those are true for the chomesh payment as well. Amar Ravina Atananami Tanina. We can also see this from a tannatic source. Hagonev truma v'lo achala. This is not our case. If I steal truma and I didn't eat it, we were talking about when I eat it, then there's chomesh. If I don't eat it, there's no chomesh payment. I just return the actual thing I stole. So I stole the Kohen's food. I give back the Kohen's food, but since I stole it, I also have to pay double payment. What do I do with the double payment? Now, truma, I stole 10 lemons. So I give back the 10 lemons, and then I have to give back the value of the 10 lemons in the kefil payment. I have to give a double payment. So I give it in money, or I could give it in, right? But the value of the lemons as truma lemons, because I stole truma lemons, and truma lemons are worth less. Why are they worth less? Because there's much less demand on them. There's much fewer people that can eat them. Whenever you can sell truma in the shuk, for example, you can only sell it for a very low price because there's only kohanim who can buy them. And basically, it's a very small market, and therefore the price is going to be lower. So when I pay the double payment, I don't pay it in 10 lemons in the shuk. I pay it in 10 lemons that are truma lemons and what they would go for in the shuk. It's a side point, not relevant to our purposes, but it just happens to appear in the source. Achala, if I eat it, so then what I have to do, I have to pay the keren, the chomesh, and the kefil, right? The double payment. So what do? Mishalem shnei kranim, I do double payment, and the chomesh. Now, the first keren that's replacing the ones I ate, the 10 lemons that I ate, mishalem keren v'chomesh menachulin. That I have to pay in produce, both the keren, and what do you see here? Also the chomesh. That answers his question. This is a proof for the fact that the Rabbi said to Rami Braham's question, the chomesh is treated like the keren. It has to be paid from the chulin. But the double payment, the keren, the second keren, which is the double payment, that I just pay in to make truma, the value of the truma. Anyway, shmamina, starting from the top of Amud Bet now, shmamina chum shok moto shmamina. From here, you see that the chomesh is like the original payment. Amar Rava. Now we're going to get to also issues about chomesh that appear in different laws in the Torah. The first one is theft. We've learned this before, not today's daf. Another chomesh payment is if I steal something from you and then deny it and swear falsely, and I say, I did not steal this from you, then I have to return. When I then admit that I actually did steal it later, if I admit, I have to pay the value of the item, the keren, I have to pay the chomesh, a fifth additional payment, and I have to, if you remember, I also have to bring a korban asham. That's not our point right here. Gabei gezel. So Rava says, Gabei gezel, we're going to go through gezel, truma, maaser, and hekdesh. Again, we're going to go through different topics of chomesh, and we're going to compare them. So by gezel, it says, v'chamishitav Yosef alav. We've talked about this pasuk before. Instead of saying chamishito, which means its fifth payment, it says its fifths payments. It's plural. Chamishitav is plural. So we're going to darshan from this plural term here. Utnan natanu et hakeren. We've learned this before. There's a Mishnah that says, if it's a Mishnah Bava Kama, natanu et hakeren v'nishbalo ala chomesh. So what happened? I lied. I said, I stole something. I lied about it. I took an oath about it in court. I then admitted that I lied. I now have to pay, let's say it was $100. I have to pay $100 plus another $25. Now what happens? Now I go to pay it. I pay you the Karen, the $100, but I don't pay you the extra 25. And then I lie and I swear falsely in court and I say I paid you the 25, even though I did it. And then I feel bad later and I admit I lied about the chomesh. So now what they say is, because it says chamishitav, you could have a case where I have to pay chomesh on the chomesh, because now I have to pay the 25, and now I have to add, when I pay the 25 back, I now have to pay an additional 25% on the 25. Okay, so that's what you learn from chamishitav. And this could keep on going as ad sheet me'eda karen p'chomesh ha'pruta. This is like half-lives. We could just keep going and going and going. I could pay 25, right? 25% of the 25, and then 25% of that 25%, and 25% of that 25%, until the chomesh is so small that it's not even a pruta, and then I won't have this payment anymore of a chomesh. But that's chomesh al chomesh, and where do we get that from? Chamishitav. The next case, we're going to learn the same thing, but not from the pasuk in the Torah. We're just going to learn it from a braita. Kabei truma ktiv. If I eat your truma, I'm a non-kohen, and I took a kohen's truma, I stole it, and I ate it. What did we learn? You have to pay the karen and the chomesh. Now, again, what if we have a case? Okay, so kabei truma ktiv is kiyochal kodesh bishkaga. If you ate it, by the way, in this case, I ate it accidentally. I didn't realize it was truma. Still, I have to pay v'yasaf chamishito alav. Now, here it doesn't say chamishitav, which would say chomesh al chomesh. Just said chamishito singular. But Tanan, despite that, it still says in the Mishnah, ha'ochel truma b'shogeg mishalem keren b'chomesh. Echad ochel, echad shoteh, echad hasach, echad truma torah, echad truma tme'ah. Okay, this is just if I eat truma accidentally, I have to pay keren and chomesh, whether I eat it, drink it, right? It could be wine, let's say. It could be oil, like from olives that I put on my body. Any kind of benefit. It could be truma that was pure. It could be truma that was impure. Either which way, I'm liable. Mishalem chumsha v'chumsha de chumsha. And then it says that I could pay the chomesh. Let's say I ate your truma, and then I paid you. Truma, right? I paid you. Remember what happens. I pay you then in produce, the keren and the chomesh, and that immediately becomes truma. And let's say I accidentally eat the part that was the chomesh. Okay, the extra 25%, I ate some of that. I could pay chomesh on the chomesh. Okay, then on that chomesh that I now eat accidentally, I now would have to pay again chomesh on that. So also, you have chomesh on chomesh. Now, what about maaser sheni? I redeem the maaser sheni, right? And then, no, in this case, it's different. There's no sin here. What happens? I redeem maaser sheni because you add chomesh for maaser sheni upon redemption. So I take my maaser sheni produce, I redeem it onto money. And then I add a chomesh, right? So I now had $100 worth of produce. I added 25. Now, if I want to take that money and redeem it again onto something else, let's say I want to move it back onto fruits, okay? Produce, can I do that? That's the whole thing. But let's say I remove it onto fruits. So now, do I have to do 125 plus a chomesh of that? Or no? Or do we say, no, it's really the base was just 100 and the chomesh was already added. I don't have to add chomesh on that. So comes the Gemara and says, or Rava and says, lo michtav ktiv, it doesn't say chamishitav, v'lo mitnatani, and it doesn't appear in any Mishnah or braita that I have to add a chomesh on a chomesh, v'lo ibayalan, and nobody even asked the question about this. It was obvious that if I redeem it onto coins or redeem it onto anything and then redeem from there onto something else, I clearly don't have to add chomesh on the chomesh. It's just going to remain at 125 forever. Okay, I could keep redeeming it. I won't have to add the extra fifth. So that's topic 3. So one had a pasuk, one had a Mishnah or a braita. Sorry, I think it's a braita. Oh, no, it's a Mishnah. One had a Mishnah, and one didn't have anything, and no one even asked the question because it was obvious that no. What about hekdesh? Hekdesh ktiv v'imam makdish v'galat beito v'yasaf chamishit kesef erkacha. So if I sanctify my house and then I redeem it, meaning I give the money to the temple, I have to add a fifth. Now, utnan, and it says, when I redeem it, I have to add a fifth. Now, that's okay. It says in the Torah, but they're quoting a Mishnah that talks about this. And notice what it doesn't say in the Mishnah. It doesn't say there, chumsha tnan, chumsha de chumsha lo tnan. The chomesh is mentioned there, but chomesh of chomesh isn't mentioned. So, therefore, here comes our question. Do we say Gabe truma ktiv vayasaf, gabe kodesh nami aktiv vayasaf. The same word vayasaf chamishito appears both in truma and in hekdesh. So it's true for truma that there's chomesh on the chomesh. Would be true for hekdesh as well. Which means, again, what does it mean in the hekdesh case? Just like the maaser sheni. I redeem my house, the value, and add another fifth. Then if I redeem that, I redeemed it, let's say, onto money. I want to redeem the money onto something else. Then I would have to add another fifth on the fifth as well. Is that the case? O dilma, or do we say gabe truma ktiv vayasa? Now, the difference in the pasuk, this is a little bit tricky and it doesn't fit exactly, but the word by truma is chamishito, and the word by hekdesh is chamishit. Okay, vayasa chamishit kesav erkachad. There's no vav at the end. So they say like this: there's a vav at the beginning of vayasa. If we took that vav and added it, we'd have two vavs at the end of chamishito, which would be kind of like chamishitav. That's why it doesn't exactly work. They're going to turn one vav into like a yud vav, which would make it plural. So we say like this. Do you say that gabe kodesh, the reason it works gabe truma ktiv vayasa. You would have like two vavs at the end, which would mean it would be plural. And that's why by truma, we're going to have chomesh on the chomesh, because even though it doesn't really say so in the pasuk, but if you took that vav from vayasa chamishito and you added the vav to the end of that word, why you would do that, I don't know, but they're basically saying if you could do that, you would end up with plural. But gabe hekdesh, because it says ktiv vayasa chamishit, well, if you add the chamishit, a vav at the end, you end up with chamishito. It's chomesh, which is only singular. Even if you took the vav of vayasa, in the end, it would just be chamishito, which would be singular. And therefore, we don't know. In other words, do we say it's got the same word vayasa, and therefore we're going to say what's true for there is true for there. There's chomesh on chomesh for truma, there'll be chomesh on chomesh for hekdesh. Or do we say, no, what are you talking about? The vayasef goes with chamishito, add that vav, you would end up with a plural. There's some reference, at least somewhat in the pasuk, where you could get a drasha that would get you to plural, whereas in hekdesh, you can't do that because the word is chamishit and it's different. Wouldn't end up plural at all. Then we'd say there is no chomesh on chomesh. So we don't know the answer, to which the Gemara says, okay, well, we'll get to answer, but first the Gemara says, why are you even asking this question? And this is going to lead us to Rabbi Yehoshua and Levi, who we're going to deal with a lot more tomorrow. Typically, to have a hekdesh sheni. Why don't you just say that this is like hekdesh sheni, which we'll talk about in a minute, but Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, a hekdesh rishon mosif chomesh, a hekdesh sheni ein mosif chomesh. You only add chomesh on the original item that was sanctified. You don't add chomesh when you redeemed on an item that was sanctified by something else. Okay, there's something called hatpasa. We learned it with a nazir. Like a nazir is walking by and you say, I'm going to be a nazir like that person. Instead of saying, hare alai niziru, like I'm taking upon myself to be a nazir, you say, I'm going to be like that person. And that person already has sanctity, and then that sanctity of niziru goes on you. Okay, you can do that with a neder, you can do it with all sorts of things. So if you take something, and this could be either hatpasa, this could be, I took an animal that was impure, right? And then I sanctified it. And then I said, and this animal like that animal, or I redeemed the sanctity onto something else from that animal. I redeemed it onto money. And then from that money, I redeemed it onto something else, which is our case. That hekdesh sheni, the only time Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says where you have chomesh is on that first. The item that came from nowhere, that was chulin, you sanctified it. Now you redeem it. Then you'll add chomesh. But on an item that already came from something that was already sanctified, you don't add chomesh. So that would be our answer. It's clear. In other words, why are you even asking this question? It's obvious from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's statement that there wouldn't be chomesh, because this, we're talking about something that was sanctified from something that was sanctified already. So why wouldn't you say that? So Amar le Rav Papi le Ravina hachi Amar Rav chomesh kitchilat hekdesh. Rav Papi says to Ravina, wait a minute. What we were talking about is you took an animal, let's say, that was worth $100. You redeemed it onto money. So now you took $100 for the $100 of the animal, and then you had to add the chomesh. What we were asking about is not do you have to add chomesh on the 100. Do you have to add chomesh on the 25? In other words, the 25 is like something that was never sanctified before. It's like a hekdesh rishon, because the 100 is something that got sanctity from the original 100. But the 25 is a new thing. So what we were asking is on the 25, maybe you have to add a quarter of that when you redeem it. because that is like something new. Okay, so therefore, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is irrelevant. Even though it's irrelevant, we're going to have a lot to say about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, but it's irrelevant to our discussion. We thought it was, it's not. So now they go back to the original question, then we'll get back to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, because they're going to do a gufa, which is, we already mentioned Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, let's understand this better. My havi'ala, you can see we've gotten totally off track about ona'ah, if you even remember, that was our topic. My havi'ala, so what's the halacha? Do you have to add chomesh on the chomesh or not? Amar Rav Yomi mishmei dabaye, Amar Kra. So Rav Yomi says in the name of Rabbi, the pasuk says, "V'yasa chamishit kesef erkacha." That was the pasuk about hekdesh. Makish chumsho lekesef erkacha. It says the chamishit of the kesef of its value. So from there you see chamishit is right juxtaposed to the kesef, the value. So what do they say? Ma kesef erko mosif chomesh, av kesef chumsho nami mosif chomesh. Just like you add chomesh to the keren, you're also going to add this fifth payment to the chomesh. And from there, they learn, just like we said before, chomesh is always like the original, and therefore, if you're going to add to that, you're going to add to that as well. Gufa. But now we're going to get into Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, and we'll start today. We're going to get into more things tomorrow. I'm Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Al hekdesh rishon mosif chomesh, al hekdesh sheni einu mosif chomesh. So that ein mosif chomesh. So we already learned that on the first item that was sanctified from nowhere, right? That it was chulin, you turned it to kodesh. When you redeem it onto something, you have to add a fifth. But an item that was sanctified from an item that was already sanctified, you wouldn't need to add the fifth. Amar Rava, my time at Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Where does he get this from? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, notice what it says, the makdish below hamatpis. Someone who's makdish. What does it mean to makdish? You take something non-sanctified, chulin, and you turn it into hekdesh. But a matpis is someone who transfers sanctity from one item to another. That's something different. That's not who they were talking about in the pasuk. And now we're going to further prove it from a braita, and with this we'll end for today. Tannatic made to Rabbi Yehoshua. There were people who we learned about these people who would bring braita to the Amoraim. So he brings a braita in front of Rabbi Yehoshua the Amora, and this is the braita. Now, Rabbi Yehoshua is going to have a problem with the meaning of this braita, and he's going to say something's off here. It must be you meant something else, and then the guy's going to say, "Oh yeah, that's what I meant." Okay, so we're going to have one of those conversations. I quoted this before. If it was a non-kosher animal and you redeem its value, and then it says you have to add the fifth. Now we're going to learn something about this behemat me'ah. We're going to learn from there other cases. What typifies a non-kosher animal that you sanctified? Miyuchedet. It's miyuchedet. It's special in the fact that tchilata hekdesh. This is what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was talking about. It's sanctified from nothing. Basically, it was chulin. It was non-sacred, and it became sanctified. And kula lashamayim, and the whole thing is sanctified, as opposed to, let's say, a sacrifice like a korban shlamim. I take a kosher animal that I'm going to bring as a korban shlamim. In the end, I'm going to eat part of that animal. So it's not fully going up to heaven, right? It's not fully sanctified. But if I say this non-kosher animal is sanctified to the temple, I basically have to bring the entire value to the temple, and therefore moalimba. Therefore, there's laws of me'ila. If I misuse, right, I accidentally use it for my own purposes, laws of me'ila kick in. Whereas if it's a korban shlamim, like an animal I'm going to use, that eventually I'm going to be able to eat some of it. So there's no me'ila because I'm actually allowed to eat it. So we can't have laws of me'ila applied. So therefore, right now we think the topic of this braita is me'ila. So therefore, anything that's like this is going to have me'ila. Anything that's not like this won't have me'ila. So what does that mean? It has to be something. In order to have me'ila, it has to be something that started as non-sacred. I sanctified it, hekdesh rishon, but not hekdesh sheni. V'kul ala shamayim, and the whole thing is sanctified to the temple. Then mo'alim. So Amar le Rabbi Lazar le tannatic. He says that makes absolutely no sense. He says bishlama kul ala shamayim. Mi'ute kodshim kalim. Dikevan ilu lebalim begavayu leipum me'ila. I get the first thing. If the second thing, kula lashamayim, if the whole thing is sanctified to God, that means as opposed to what I just said, kochim kalim, they get eaten by the mass, right, by the owner, like shlamim. So that for sure there's no me'ila. I get that, but it makes no sense. The tchilat hekdesh, and what are you saying? It's hekdesh, meaning it came from chulin and went to hekdesh. But if I did hatpasa, I said this animal will be like that animal and it's sanctified. What? There's no me'ila? Of course there's me'ila. That second animal. So what if its strength came from another hekdesh as opposed to came from chulin and I turned it into hekdesh? Either which way, that second animal is fully sanctified, and of course there's me'ila. So you can't possibly say that, right? So what's the tchilat hekdesh coming to say? Must be for the continuation of that pasuk. This braita must mean, and then it's going to prove Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Tchilat hekdesh hu deibu meila. Sorry, so hekdesh leibu meila. That's the question. Maybe what you're saying is it has to be like a behemat me'ah for the rest of the pasuk to kick in, for the chomesh part to kick in. That only if it's tchilat hekdesh are you obligated to pay chomesh. But if it's secondary hekdesh, it was sanctified from something that was already sanctified, then you wouldn't add the hekdesh. And to which the guy who brought the braita said, oh yeah, amar le'in, hachi kamina. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Whether it was or not is a whole separate question. Okay, we're going to start tomorrow's daf with a whole question on this behemat me'ah. Who says behemat me'ah is only tchilat hekdesh? You could have a behemat me'ah that's not tchilat hekdesh. So why are you defining in this pasuk behemat me'ah is something that's tchilat hekdesh? It could also be self hekdesh. You could have a behemat me'ah that you turn into another behemat me'ah and make sanctified in the same way. So the whole premise of this braita is somewhat problematic. That will be tomorrow's topic, at least the beginning of tomorrow. So quick review. We started with chomesh milavar or milagav, right? Is it calculate 1/5 or 1/4? Then we said, is chomesh ma'akev or not ma'akev? And then we saw, right, with the different topics. From there, we got to Rami Bar Hama's question about, are these laws about the chomesh just like laws for the keren? And we talked about particular laws and said, do they apply also? And we said, yes, the chomesh is the same. And then Rava came and gave this list of gezel, truma, maaser, and hekdesh, and discussed by each one, is there chomesh on the chomesh? And from there, we got sidetracked into Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, which in the end we said wasn't connected, but in the end we went into his statement about hekdesh sheni. With that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a chag kasher v'sameach, and those who I see every day on Zoom. So I'll see you guys in a week. Looking forward to being back on Zoom, but have a little bit of a break for the week of Pesach. And like I said, all the shiurim are already up on the site. After I post today's doc, basically I'm going to post them all, and the one you'll see at the top of the site, with the first page on the site, will actually be the last day of Pesach. As I mentioned before, each doc has links. You can just click on one page that has all the links to all the shiurim to make it easier to navigate your way on the site if you're listening through the site. And if you're listening through the podcast, they'll all go up as on the day of. Okay. With that, wishing everyone a chag kasher v'sameach, shenishma b'sorot tovot, and we have somewhat freedom from our current situation.